Welcome to the Global Black Economic Forum. Please welcome your host, political commentator, social impact leader, and author, Alencia Johnson.
Exactly. Okay, let me talk to you. You're good?
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay.
You all look so
Right now. Yeah,
good.
make sure you two are
And
good.
welcome to the annual Global Black
No.
Economic Forum Access and Economic
started.
Opportunity Summit. I'm Alencia Johnson, and I'm so excited to be your host again this year. The Global Black Economic Forum is dedicated to advocating for Black, marginalized, and underrepresented communities around the world through thought leadership, global summits like this one, workplace training, leadership development, and policy advocacy. And today, we are gathered here at the beautiful Four Seasons in New Orleans at the 30th anniversary of the Essence Festival of Culture, and we mark another invite-only summit, so give it up for yourselves. Last year, we gathered at a very pivotal time. The affirmative action decision had just come down, dismantling DEI efforts in affirmative action. Also, shortly after, the year before, abortion rights in this country was dismantled. And this week alone, we learned that the Supreme Court is allowing for a president to become a dictator. And last week, they said that federal agencies cannot regulate our communities to ensure that they are healthy and safe if a corporation tells them they disagree. Around the same time, the United States is going through an election where one of the candidates is indicted on 34 felony charges. While we know in Black and brown communities, too many of ours are overcharged or have felony convictions and cannot advance. And while that's just here in the US, we have to think about what's happening globally. More than half the global population will have an election this year that will determine whether or not democracy moves forward or regresses. And so all of our rights are connected. We know that when democracy is threatened, the opportunity and equity for the diaspora is also threatened. Our ability to have economic power, to close the racial wealth gap, to live freely, as our economic development is directly tied to the ability to live in healthy and safe communities. So we've got a lot to cover today, and we're gonna try to get through it in the few hours that we have before y'all get back to the parties. Every one of you has been invited here for a purpose, because all of you are influential in your respective industries. You all are the pinnacle of Black leadership and culture, disruptors who use your influence for purpose. And so to be real, we often gather in these spaces, we look good, we talk about all of the issues, but we don't talk about solutions. That's what makes the summit different. We're going to walk away with solutions and thought-provoking ideas for us to collaborate together. And so today, you're gonna hear from some dynamic speakers across so many industries from around the globe to talk about that. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors who make today possible. It's a list, so I need for you all to hold your applause while I get through all of them. We have Google, Gilead, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Entergy, Diageo, L'Oreal Group, Eli Lilly, Sister Song, Amazon Web Services, Merrick, When We All Vote, U.S. News and World Report, McDonald's, the Minority Business Development Agency, the U.S. Small Business Administration, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, Native Land Pod, and the Louisiana Economic Development. Give it up for our sponsors. And, of course, this wonderful production, please give it to the Black woman-owned MVD Inc. production team. So to kick things off, I would like to introduce the president of the Global Black Economic Forum, Alphonso David. He is a social and economic justice advocate and lawyer who brings more than 2 decades of experience in the private, public, and not-for-profit sectors, working to advance the rights of marginalized communities through policy, litigation, legislation, and advocacy. Please give it up for Alphonso David.
Good morning. Whoa. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is wonderful to see many old friends alongside some new faces. The growth of the Global Black Economic Forum has really been extraordinary. I know that many of you traveled great distances to be here across the United States and, in fact, across the globe. Your active participation here matters. And I want to welcome the millions of people that are watching our summit via live stream on ss.com and gbev.com. I also want to thank one of our partners, U.S. News and World Report, as they are also going to be covering this summit. You just heard from Valencia about the state of play in the United States. It was an eloquent summary of the highly volatile, high-stakes moment that we find ourselves in. By many measures, we have made progress in advancing economic opportunity. But that progress has been limited and is now in regression. We are now living in an age of coordinated, intense blowback, like nothing that we have seen in years. But these attacks are not supported by the vast majority of people living in the United States. A poll issued last week by the Washington Post showed that 60% of Americans support diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And when actually paused to explain what it actually means, what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually means, that number rises to 70%. And yet the attacks in the courts and the legislatures continue. The question for us is, what are we going to do about it? The attacks on equality, the attacks on equity, and ultimately the attacks on economic opportunity. At the Global Black Economic Forum, we develop public policy. We advance leadership development work. And we are convening people of all geographic and ideological perspectives and backgrounds who are actively engaged in making sure we keep progress pushing forward. Even when it feels like we're pushing a boulder up a hill, even when the hill feels like a mountain, we know that our work to advance economic opportunity is central to our freedom. This is a summit not just for talking. This is a summit for action. Yes, we have a critical U.S. election coming up in November, but we also have more people who will vote in elections this year across the globe than any other year in human history. We have had or will have elections in Rwanda, France, India, Pakistan, Venezuela, Mexico, South Africa, Ghana, and just yesterday in the United Kingdom. And there are many other countries. Whatever happens in November or this year in any other part of the globe, we will have a tremendous amount of work ahead of us. Our commitment to economic opportunity should not be contingent on who wins an election or whichever political power party is in power. We must have a seat at the table no matter who is in office, recognizing that the president in this country and in many countries has a lot of power. We also must not lose sight of the fact that there are all levels of influence in political offices, in business industries, in philanthropic sectors. We have a lot of work to do, and we also have a lot of influence in this room and those that are watching via live stream. Let's commit ourselves as a community and as individuals to do that work, to be just as coordinated and just as strategic as those that fear economic opportunity. Let's remember that this summit and the work that is being driven by the Global Black Economic Forum is driven by action and by impact. And I just want to say before we go to the panel, I also want to give a huge shout out to Richelieu Dennis, who has been such an incredible supporter of this work. He, as you know, is the founder of Sundial Media, or Sundial Group of Companies. And without his support, we could not do this work. So I want to personally thank him. So thank you again for being here. It's going to be a remarkable summit, and I look forward to not only turning this conversation you're about to hear into action, but all of the conversations that we're going to have during the summit. So please help me welcome to the stage 4 trailblazers who are taking action and making headway in government, in the courts of law and public opinion, and in executive offices and supply rooms all across the country. First, please help me welcome Oley Dibba-Wadda, who's the executive director of the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Center for Women and Development. Theofelus, who is the Minister of Information, Communication, and Technology for Namibia, and an Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Foundation Amujae leader. She is also the youngest woman government minister in both the entire continent of Africa as well as Namibia. Arian Simone, the Chief Executive Officer of the Theofelus Fund, which is a venture capital firm that all of you have probably heard about. And last but certainly not least, Yang Maguire, who is the president of the National Minority Supplier Development Council. Welcome to you all. You are all here because of your unwavering support of equity, and because you have partnered with the Global Black Economic Forum in very important ways. People sometimes shy away from partnerships because they think they're about to lose something. And we hold on to things and we are fearful of entering into partnerships. But frankly, I feel that one of the most efficient and effective ways to advance change is through partnerships and collaboration. We live in a very fast-paced environment, and the mechanics of driving change can sometimes get lost. For the audience, I want us to be grounded in what these partnerships are, what impact we're hoping to achieve, and whether or not we're actually advancing change. So with that, I want to start with you, Ms. Dibba-Wadda. The Global Black Economic Forum partnered with the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Foundation to support women leaders on the continent of Africa. We launched that partnership last year with an investment of $100,000 for the next 3 years. Can you please talk about what that partnership is to you and what impact you hope we can achieve?
Thank you very much, Alphonso. Good morning to all of you. Alphonso, when we received that commitment from the Global Black Economic Forum, it was such a relief for the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Center and for the Amujae leaders. And one of the discussions that we had and we kept having was a convening of bringing women together, the Amujae leaders in particular, to discuss and identify challenges that they share, that they experience, and solutions going forward. The Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Center has 42 Amujae leaders from 19 different countries. These Amujae leaders are women who are blazing trails, who are breaking glass ceilings, women who are running for public office, the highest public office as presidential candidates, mayors, governors, ministers, advisors to presidents, members of parliament. And as you had mentioned, Emma is one of the Amujae leaders. Myself, I am also a member of the Amujae leadership and also the executive director of the Amujae leadership. And I had also left my job at the African Development Bank to defy the odds and return home to engage in politics as well. In April 2024, we convened the Amujae leaders in Kigali. And they came up with a communique, thanks to the funding from the Global Black Economic Forum, that what they needed were 3 key things. One was they needed a war chest. They needed tools that would prepare them to navigate around the leadership challenges that they face. They wanted a boot camp where Amujae leaders who are vying for offices, whether it's political or public office, to prepare them for these positions that they aspire for, and also a convening of Amujae leaders, women lifting other women. It's very lonely at the top, it's very challenging, and oftentimes, sometimes as women, climbing up the ladder, we feel like we just need to step down, throw in the towel, and get on with life. But we lift each other up, we celebrate each other, we cry together, we pray together, we laugh together. And the convening couldn't have happened at a better time. So these are some of the exciting opportunities that we have benefited from the support we got from the Global Black Economic Forum. Thank you.
Minister Theofelus, you of course are a product or a manifestation of that investment. Can you talk about, in practical terms, for people who may not know, how you benefited from this program and continue to?
Thank you so much, Alphonso, and a very good morning to everybody. Everything Oley said is exactly what young black female leaders on the African continent, I believe anywhere else, need the support of. A little bit about my journey is I became a member of parliament and deputy minister of the Ministry of ICT at the age of 23. I just left university. And the time I started my job was right at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, where I had not only become the deputy government spokesperson and had to communicate government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was also unpopular, unfamiliar to have a child in a position of leadership at that level. Fast forward to this year in February, I got promoted to minister and became the official government spokesperson. But throughout the journey, I was the only one. I was dealing with my colleagues who are majority male and who are over the age of 70. 23-year-old, 70-year-old, the conversations are very different. So the Amujae leadership and the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Center, what it gave to me was, one, the ability to have a sisterhood. Sisters who are members of parliament under the age of 30. Sisters who are ministers under the age of 40. A mentor in President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf who talks about her journey and how she was able to overcome. Many a times you don't have people who can tell you how to deal with certain situations, how to navigate certain conversations, how to navigate certain crises. So all of that sisterhood, just somebody sharing their experience and how they dealt with it was very comforting to me to see that it is possible to overcome and it is possible to do it. But more than that, it's really a convening where you can actually breathe as a person in leadership, because at times the expectations are high. It's almost an ongoing, expectation on how you can deliver. But in the Johnson Sirleaf Amujae sisterhood, I'm able to breathe. I'm able to talk about the challenges as they are. I'm able to be human and not the title and position. And that is really what I've been able to receive this past 2 years, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you. Shifting to you, Arian Simone. I met Arian Simone in August of last year at one of the most challenging moments of her life. She had just been sued for attempting to support women of color here in the United States. There's been a lot written about you. There's been a lot written about the Fearless Fund. In your own words, I want to give you a moment to talk about where you are, how you feel about this moment that you're in, and what you hope we can actually accomplish out of this fight.
Whew.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. Good morning, everybody. First, thank you and the Global Black Economic Forum for having this convening. And thank you, Alphonso David. He has been right by my side through this process. He serves even on our legal counsel. Am I able to disclose that?
You can.
Okay.
I'm your lawyer.
Yes, so thank you for your sacrifice, your dedication, and your time to something that is very near and dear to my heart. I run the nation's first venture capital fund that is built by women of color for women of color. And on August 2nd, it was a beautiful day in Atlanta, Georgia, and we found out through the news that we were being sued in a federal lawsuit for alleged discrimination because we invest in black and brown women. Where we are at currently, people who, if you've kept up with the case, we went to court on a preliminary injunction in September. regarding one of our grant programs, and we won in the district court. The plaintiffs appealed immediately, and recently we had an appeals ruling that they're claiming that we can be in violation of the law by running that grant program. So that's where we are at currently. We are definitely still in this fight and looking to come to a resolution with it. It's not about where I'm at right now. It's actually about where we all are at right now. The current political climate is what is taking place. We are clearly caught up in somebody's political agenda. This is not about the Fearless Fund. This is about the state of America and this apparent anti-American campaign that is going on to dismantle or attempt to dismantle the rights of people of color and the rights of women and the rights of other marginalized communities. And when you talk about partnership a second ago and what the importance of that is, it's only through partnership and collaboration that we will be able to make change and cause economic justice to take place. But that's where we're currently at. Thank you.
So in many of your interviews, you've referred to this phrase, economic freedom.
Yes.
Spend a few minutes talking about what that is, what that means to you as it relates to this work.
Economic freedom. We got into this space to reduce the racial wealth gap. We got into this space to build generational wealth. We got into this space to affect job creation. And for that to be attacked, threatened, it tells you right there that we are clearly not economically free. There should never be an attempt to stop anybody from building generational wealth in a marginalized community. If we don't have economic freedom, we don't have freedom at all. What good are any of these rights if I can't even pay my bills or have access to money? What good is any of that? We have to be economically free.
And just to put a finer point on it, because I know way too much about this area, given that we've been representing you, only 0.036% of venture capital dollars goes to black women. So put that into context, that's $288 billion allocated each and every year, and only 0.036% goes to black women. And if you were to expand the pie for all black people, it's less than 1%.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it's unfortunate when you're talking about a group of people who make over 15% of the population for who is accounted for. And when you're talking about a group of people who are starting businesses more than any other entrepreneurial demographic, just the most founded, but the least funded. And we have to join together at this critical moment in history that is taking place. It seems at times people have been, I guess, very asleep, and there's this term called being woke. It's not good enough to just be woke. You have to be awake and take action. Like, you can't just be woke. No, we need you to be woke and take action. We need you to, right now, to petition your lawmakers to help get laws and policies in place that protect the right to fund marginalized communities if and when racial disparities exist. You have to take action, and you can be a change agent from your seat. You don't have to be in any of the positions of any of us on stage. Everybody can talk to your lawmakers. They work for us. We don't work for them. They work for the people of the United States of America.
Ying, shifting to you, you heard we just talked about a few stats that I think objectively should be concerning to anyone. You represent the largest not-for-profit that works on behalf of minority businesses, black and brown businesses across the country. Talk a little bit about, we, of course, entered into a partnership with your not-for-profit to try to provide support to businesses. Talk to the business leaders in this room about what you see are the biggest opportunities and the biggest hurdles that are confronting minority businesses.
Well, thank you, Alphonso, for having me here. It's my first time, and it will not be the last. What an honor to share the stage with these well-accomplished leaders and well color-coordinated, too. Did you think? So before I talk about partnership and barriers, I want to share with you what we do first, because I see some strange faces you may not know. NMSDC, National Minority Supplier Development Council, in 1960s and the 70s, amid the civil rights movement, President Nixon issued an executive order aimed at a racial equity, which created NMSDC. It's really a catalyst for economic justice, and we pioneered opportunities in the corporate supply chain for Black, brown businesses. We serve Black, Hispanic, AAPI, Native American businesses. And our impact is way beyond the supply chain. It's about correcting unequal access to wealth building opportunities. NMSDC certified MBEs generated last year $363 billion in annual revenue and created 2 million jobs. So we're here to empower job creators. And you want to ask us to talk about barriers. One of the barriers is it's really people's mindset. We have 1,500 corporate partners, and they're doing really amazing work in partnership with us to help our MBEs to scale and grow. But at the same time, some of the mindset barriers, people think that MBEs are small and not scalable. And people think that they're giving handouts. But it's so not true. MBEs, we have MBEs at $16 billion in revenue, so they're completely scalable. They can address global contracts. In fact, we have MBE sitting in the audience. He's taking a video. Corey from ABCD and Company, 4 Howard University friends, formed a marketing and event production agency, and today they're all over the country. They actually produce NMSDC's 6,000 people annual conference and exchange and in Atlanta this year. And they're producing a majority part of Essence Festival right there. Just, Corey, just stand up and let us recognize you. You know, so he's a living example how MBE can address very large contracts. The other barrier I want to talk about is something you mentioned, that there have been purposeful, well-funded, well-coordinated legal and political strategy that try to block the participation of Black, brown people in the economic life in this country. I came to this country. I arrived in this country with one suitcase and $1,000 with very little English. I still speak English, inspired by the American promise of freedom and opportunities. Today, this promise faces threats by a small group of people and organizations. They're making lots of noise. People feel like sky is falling, but actually it's by a very small group of people and organizations. Alphonso, you know that we worked with public-private strategies who conducted a survey through Morning Consult, and they surveyed 1,000 senior corporate executives, and you know, more than 73% of corporate executives that they identify themselves as conservative executives, they believe that diverse initiatives is good for their business. So I believe a small group of organization is trying to dismantling the work we have done last 50 years, but we're not gonna stop. Therefore, the partnership with you and with you all is so important, because this mission is bigger than any one of us. And this mission is bigger than any one of our organizations. In 2022, when we did our economic impact study, we discovered that the Black businesses face huge disparities, even comparing to other ethnic minority businesses. Therefore, we intentionally sort out our partnership with you, and a year later, I'm pleased to share with you that our Black businesses have seen some progress. In 2023, Black businesses the NMSDC certified businesses saw 12% year-over-year growth. So thank you for your partnership.
Absolutely.
And we're here in this together, and we stand together with you, Ariel.
So there's 2 points I want to close us on. You have black and brown businesses here in the United States and across the globe that see the attacks. They see the challenges. You have women leaders that are looking to create space in spaces that don't necessarily recognize them. You have business leaders that have to make decisions, but under a fair amount of pressure in their minds, a lot of noise, a lot of misinformation. So my question to all of you, and we'll start with you, Minister. What is the call to action to the people in this room? When we opened this forum, we said this is about action, not talk. You have people in this room, people who are watching, decision makers who have to decide where to fund, how to fund, whether to fund, how to advance policy, whether to advance policy. What is the message that you would like to leave them with as we move forward into advancing economic opportunity for all?
Well, I think from my perspective, Alphonso, as a Minister of ICT, I also oversee the film industry in Namibia. And I've been intentional about, one, through the Film Industry Fund, to fund black female projects. It was an intention. I took that decision as a minister because I'm able to do so. So everybody in the room, my call to action is, one, understand what tools are there that your lawmakers, your decision makers are using to either divert funds where they want to divert them, and whether that is in the interest of this black economic freedom we're talking about, and then hold them accountable. Do that in all kinds of ways that you can, because it's very difficult for me to divert those funds where they're supposed to be if there are people actually paying attention, if there are people who understand the dynamics of the power I wield as a lawmaker. So my call to action is inform yourself and then pressure those that make the decisions. Thank you.
Yes. I think the word intentional has been spoken by all three of us. And I think there's a need to be intentional. Women have agency. The stories we have all said or talked to you about are similar stories, similar experiences. We hold half the sky and we gave birth to the other half. You cannot fly with one wing. And if
Can you say that again?
we hold half the sky and we gave birth to the other half.
Got it. Okay.
So without us, we cannot move forward.
Was a moment.
I think there should be an intentional approach to supporting women's businesses, women's aspirations for leadership. When COVID happened, we all saw the countries that succeeded as a result of women-led governments. They prioritized human capital. They prioritized human beings first. They didn't think about defense. They didn't think about anything else except the people. And we know that as women, we are fixers. We make things happen. When it fails, we come to fix it up. So my appeal is to ensure that we continue to provide this space, less of talking. I think we've talked for 50 years. We've supported for independence for everybody. I think it is time that there is an intentional purpose of bringing women together, providing the space for women to tell their stories, her story, not his story. It is important that we also provide opportunities for women to network. Thanks to the GBEF, we're sitting here, we're sharing similar stories. The Amujae initiative is breaking barriers, is shattering glass ceilings, is disrupting the disruptors. We need to make sure that President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, as the first and only democratically elected woman president in Africa, has a legacy to ensure that we have at least 15 women that would lead as heads of state or presidents in Africa to ensure that we change the status quo. It cannot be business as usual. So we appeal for support to getting women in leadership positions, public leadership, political leadership. That's the only way that we can ensure that your children, your grandchildren, and generations yet unborn will be prioritized over areas that are beyond thinking of human beings. Thank you.
Arian Simone.
To just carry on, excuse me, from that message of intentionality. When race-based or sex-based programs are being threatened for being conscious, and if you were to eliminate them, what happens is the Black race gets left behind. What happens is that women get left behind, which is why intentionality is so important. Over 80 major elections are taking place worldwide this year. And the call to action for me is very, very simple. Again, we need our rights to protect and fund race-based, sex-based programming to be upheld. It has to be upheld. So when we talk about the intentionality of creating those programs, we're having a situation in the United States where they're trying to make it illegal to have those programs. So we have to make sure our right to protect and fund marginalized communities is protected. So my call to action is simple. Everybody has to reach out to their lawmakers to make sure we have policy in place that protects those rights.
Ing McGuire, the last word.
Thank you. I think America's economic landscape needs to mirror our diverse population. And so for corporate leaders in the room and around the world watching through streaming, make sure you integrate minority businesses, underserved businesses in every aspect of your business. And for a minority business in the room, do business with each other, support each other. And for all of the organizations in the room, let's collaborate to influence a multi-generational result. And for those of you who have extra money in your pocket, invest in Fearless Fund.
I want to thank these leaders for coming. I want to thank them for sharing their stories. I want to thank them for grounding us in why partnerships are so important. Now, these are just 3 partnerships that we've identified, but we have many others. We are partnering with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights on Election Protection. We're partnering with others, U.S. News and World Report, to make sure that we are actually not talking to ourselves, but instead talking to all people with respect to economic opportunity. We have to make sure that as we move the boulder up the hill, we're breaking down the silos that exist, and we're looking beyond the perceived limitations that exist. Because we can only actually achieve economic opportunity and economic freedom if we're looking beyond the perceived limitations that others have placed on us. I'll leave you with this. When we think about the lines that have been drawn, just use the continent of Africa as an example. Those lines are arbitrary. They were drawn by other people. And as we think about the opportunities that we have not fully realized, let's remove those lines and actually embrace economic freedom for all. Thank you all for listening to this panel. I will now welcome our host back up to the stage.
You can do what you're doing. If you want to do it while I'm... That way. All right.